Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Shieldcoomer aka Sirigath, and in this video we're gonna be covering Azureblade 24 on the Fortified week. Affixes, as you can see, are Sanguine, Volcanic, Thundering, Fortified. This was
Empower.
I think my second Azureblade on 24 attempted. I have attempted one on Tyrannical before this, and it went really good until it didn't, and then we just, this key is actually kind of tight on time, or at least it was. It did get nerfed. I think this was right before nerf. So I think now the timer has been increased to 35:30. I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, this is from this discipline priest perspective, which is my main. It's a pretty fun spec to play. And a couple of fun interactions, as you can see already in this dungeon, is what we can do is we can mass dispel the dots that these trees are putting, so that vastly reduces the pressure on your group, that on how much interrupts you need, which is nice. Although I think for most groups that's not really a big problem. And also cool thing here is, this is a really rare scenario, by the way, for me. I don't know what others people experiences are, but 2 priests in one dungeon is very unorthodox. As you know, guys, I'm sure are aware, Shadow Priest is currently a big meta spec. It is really strong and popular. I see a lot of people playing it. Mostly when I'm playing on my evoker, then I notice it way more, because obviously I rarely get invites to the keys which already have Shadow Priest, and honestly, like most Shadow Priests, like they're pretty good. At least in my experience, I have not seen like a Shadow Priest around 3000 Vio that is not like pumping big DPS and playing very well. So I guess it's just I'm assuming that most of these people are players that are re-rolled into Priest. They're already good players and they just wanted to play something that's a little bit more meta at the moment. Probably the most meta caster actually at the moment, because what other caster is truly meta? I guess Mage a little bit, and maybe Boomkin, but as far as I'm aware, Ferals are borderline better. And I just think like Shadow Priest right now is like the go-to caster for, at the moment. For both AoE situations and single target, I've seen them do some serious damage on both, so yeah. But yeah, enough about Shadow Priest. I didn't want to talk about that much. I just wanted to mention that in case this happens to you, if you're playing, a Disc Priest and you get a Shadow Priest in your team, just make sure you're not overlapping your PIs. It might be worth tracking his PI, just making sure that you're also coordinating your mass dispels. As you can see, like here, a very, like, kind of like...
5, 4,
this was, I remember when this happened, I remember this, I thought to myself, oh god, somebody's gonna leave. And I know this key is timeable because I spent like good 5 to 10 minutes talking to these guys about what we want to do in this dungeon, which is usually a sign of a good pug group. You know that if your pug group talks about a key before the key, you usually know that these guys are, they're good and committed and stuff. So I'm really happy that we didn't leave. That was probably the biggest, I think, mistake we've had this whole dungeon. We just let a little bit too many casts go through, and things just kind of like, went to doo-doo. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I can say about that. That was just like unfortunate. I didn't really have proper like time to mass dispel everybody because we weren't even stacked. We just kind of went in like bozos and we got served, It is what it is. I don't want to say... These high keys have been pretty interesting for me to play personally, because I have this feeling like tanks right now are mostly self-sustainable, most of them at least, in my experience. I mean, every now and then you'll run into some bad tanks that need a lot of healing. This is very unusual though, like even on Fortified weeks, you will see, I mean, this dungeon is one of the most like tank buster dungeons in the game, and like Warrior has barely been taking any damage. I've also started playing a lot with Paladins. I really enjoy playing with Paladins for 2 reasons. One is they can help me with some off heal, which is, that burst off heal in like in situations where we make mistake as a group is exactly what Discipline Priest lacks, and that's exactly what Prot Pala brings. So it's been like a good synergy sort of. And also, like, I think our paint sub is beautiful on Prot Pala, you know, as long as you're tracking their CDs properly. You can clutch it out with the paint sub, you know, you can help them out if they have the kite or something, so they drop their, what do you call it, the shields and stuff, you know, if they're just, it's just helpful, right? You know, you can cover the weaknesses that the spec has, which is, you know, the downtime of defensives. Similar to how, I mean, most tanks function the same way. The same goes for Prot Warriors, same goes for DKs, you know, it's just about, honestly, having friend that plays tanks, and if they can kind of like tell you when they feel most vulnerable, will go a long way for any healer. I feel like it's such a good thing to have, you know, to talk to people and help out and stuff. And that's why I highly encourage, you know, when you're pugging, it's very easy to, you know, tank dies and you just think, oh man, this tank is like shit, like I'm so good, tank is bad. But I would actually advise, like, usually like DMing tank, obviously, unless they're toxic. If they're toxic, there's no point. But for your own learning purposes, like, usually what I do is like I'll DM a tank or ask him in a group if I'm not, you know, feeling shy that day, and I'll just be like, yo man, like, did I mess up? Like, was there anything I could have done there to help you live? Because sometimes, you know, tanks just make a mistake, you know, he might have misclicked the button, he might have turned his back towards like a critical mob or something, and he just died. Like, that happens. It is what it is. It's part of the game. People make mistakes. But it's, you know, it's good to check. Maybe he just pressed everything he could have possibly humanly pressed, and he was just kind of hoping you'll save him, and maybe you had something to save him in as well. You know, on high keys, oftentimes these things are decided, you know, within 1 or 2 globals, and it's good to know, right? Especially as disc, like our bread and butter is preventive healing, and here you'll see, like, as the explosive brand goes off, right? I will always like shield people here. I'll make sure they have atonements. I do want to explain this boss because I think this boss is a little bit tricky. It's one of the spooky ones, and you need to clear your trees. And here, actually, I think I die here because I did not see that this tree is up, so I didn't press any major defensives. I had Desperate Prayer, and you can see here I was in shock. I did not believe that I just died there, and I thought that's gonna be like GG almost. Luckily it wasn't, like, we managed to recover. Pretty rough start, as you can see, and here, you know, Infused Strike hurts tanks a lot, and I usually paints up almost every single one, because we do have 2, right? And then again, unless it's a Prot Pala who can just bubble one of them, or you can, I don't know if you can AMS that or Spell Reflect. Maybe it's possible. Anyway, that spell hurts, so make sure you're topping up tanks for that. And as you can see here, again, atonements are running, guys. Very important. Atonements on everyone. Although I did mistime my atonements there a little bit, and there here tanks gets in danger. I put a barrier down. And here the tricky part about barriering this particular boss is when you put your barrier, and if these saplings die in the barrier, then people get scared to stand in it, because obviously the bubbles are there and bubbles will one-shot you even in barriers. So it's just like kind of like a tricky situation. Here you can see like a rare case where I will consume my my harsh discipline onto tank. It's you know, for healing. Like, I usually do it for DPS, but you know, sometimes you just feel like you need a little bit of extra healing, and it's a good, like, who else than tank, right? Like, that's kind of goes without saying. And here you can see I'm rapturing everybody, and then I'll probably throw 2 radiances or 1, depending on, you know, how much it heals, and just make sure everybody's topped up for consuming stomp. And as you can see, this spell is really not that scary as long as you're prepared and, you know, everybody's running their defensives up. People are tanky usually on high keys, you know. That's, I feel like, one of the biggest differences, because, you know, I have a Walker that's running usually around 22s. My Walker is just like 1 key level below my priest at the moment. We'll see what happens now with 1007. I'm looking forward to, you know, Disc isn't getting any changes, but Evoker is getting big nerfs. So I'm hoping we get pushed up a little bit, you know. I hope, like, Disc Priest makes like a slight comeback as a sort of like meta. And here you can see I got confused how I died, and now I think one of these guys will tell me that the tree stayed up and I didn't press defensive, which he's right. So I just that was just like my mistake for not seeing that the tree is up. It's very spooky. Very spooky when this guy does consuming stomp and you don't have anything. up. But yeah, in general, I hope with the new patch we will get some, you know, mix up in the meta of healers and stuff. I think Druid still remains like kind of like number one, and Evoker might drop to second spot because they are currently, I think, first. And I think they will drop. We'll see though. Usually, you know, at this point in the expansion, it might not even matter that much. I think people are just like playing whatever they want at this point. Everybody's geared and stuff. But I'm looking forward to it. You know, I want to try and push for the title. So I'll probably do so on my priest. As I said, my evoker is not far behind, so if I think that evoker is like stronger, I might actually do it on the evoker, but it will feel kind of silly getting, you know, a title on an alt over your main. But I gotta say, like, pushing on evoker has felt so much easier than on priest. With priest, I feel like for so many situations I have to press my buttons perfectly and stuff, and on evoker I have so many buttons to bail me out of the bad spots and stuff. So I really like evokers right now. And they're fun to play as well. They're not like, you know, they're not like a dumb spec, you know. It's not like you just press heals to heal people. It's very complex spec which has like a lot of interactions between the talents and stuff, and so many things to utilize and min-max and stuff like that. And I really like that about a lot of specs that play like that, you know. I like specs that have cool interactions within their own toolkit rather than something else, you know. And here I think, I'm not sure if he was asleep or not there. If he was, then it's my bad. If not, then it's his bad. But either way, obviously make sure you're watching here who is getting slapped. Watch out for the tank, although this pack doesn't hurt tank too much. But it does hurt, you know, it does hurt. And sleeps need to be interrupted very well here, and then obviously you have to dodge these things. And just Sanguine makes this dungeon very, very, very annoying because tank usually has to watch out for the frontals and stuff. And I mean, moving things out of Sanguine is like really hard work at times, so interrupts need to be on point. It's a group effort. We currently don't have many tools to help them here, because all we bring is like Fear Root. That's it. We don't even have our knock anymore, which is why Blizzard. Why take our knock away? I really liked Shining Force. Unfortunately, we don't have it anymore, which is also another point for druids, right, that have a Typhoon. I was wondering if I should levitate someone. I mean, yeah, levitate, but I decided not to, because I didn't want to, like, kill someone by levitating them. As if they kill themselves, it's kind of in-game. It's kind of fine, but if I do it, then I know they're gonna rage and, like, blame and mold, and I just decided not to mess with anything. Like, if somebody asks you to levitate them, but otherwise I wouldn't do it. Unless I'm asked, I avoid doing it. I have a macro that cancels it on myself, so I know I can just throw myself and levitate at any point and cancel it, and then reapply it whenever I want. But like this, it's, yeah, kind of spooky. And there nobody wanted to clear that the melee, right? Because they're scared of the frontal, so I just went and did it. You know, just a lowly priest, and there we kind of overlapped CC and stuff, but it's not a big deal as long as things get interrupted. Like, these things, like, with a good group, they die so fast that it doesn't matter. Like, look at the pump on the Shadow Priest. 125k. They really are crazy at the moment. And it's also cool here with you know, with having two priests. It's kind of nice because you have like 4 PIs, which is just crazy when you think about it. It's so good. It overall just increases the DPS of everyone by so much, and you can see how I think I PI'd like Druid a couple of times because I was convinced. I still cannot believe that we live in a reality where Feral exists, and this is no shade towards Feral. It's just that they were such a redundant spec the entirety of the Shadowlands. Like, they were popular for I think like 1 tier, and even then like not too popular. Like, you would only take them like as like last desperate call or something. There were so many melees that were better than them, so it's like we finally live in a reality where Feral is relevant, and I just cannot grasp that fact. And oftentimes I think I just assume they're boomy, and boomy gets like a lot of value on 5+ targets with a PI, so I have a tendency to PI them. And as far as I know, Feral does not get much from PI, so it's usually a waste. It's better to just PI Shamis. Luckily here we didn't have to make a choice, right? Because everybody gets a PI. You get a PI, I get a PI, everybody gets a PI. I do want to say, like, it's not completely crazy. Oh, actually, I want to talk about the specs. Never mind. Forget the PI talk. We'll come back to it if I remember. But like here, guys, like, look at this paint sub. It might seem unnecessary, and it might have been, but I just want to make sure that this guy does not die to ice cutters. Dude, these spells actually hurt so much. These ice cutting bastards, when they hit you on a fortified key, they shred. I have seen tanks like die to just 2 of these, let alone 4, and this guy's pulling like crazy, probably because he knows his limits. And I highly encourage like DPSers to stun and do any sorts of interrupts to ice cutters, because they really hurt. Like tanks get destroyed by this. It is such a big deal if you can nullify all of that damage with just like some fierce stuns and stuff like that. It really helps. And here, obviously, you know, as a support role, you should be the one purging. You know, sometimes when I pop Mindbender and stuff, I kind of slack on purging. I do my damage rotation and stuff like that. Like, I'll focus on healing tank and doing damage. But for the most part, like, if I can purge, I'll purge and stuff like that. Like, of course, I'm not gonna like ask, you know, my Shadow Priest or Shaman to drop their like DPS and globals in order to purge. So it should be you, don't forget. And it's important because that the armor they put on themselves, I don't know what it's called, I'll tell you now when I see it being cast. It's something like ice armor or something like that. It actually gives them 30% magic resistance, so it's a pretty big deal to interrupt it. Yeah, there it is. So see, he got buffed now, and somebody purged. That wasn't me, at least I don't think it was me. So it's pretty big deal to kind of like get that interrupted and just make sure that everybody can deal maximum amount of damage. Obviously,
4,
like
3.
This group has quite a bit of magic damage. Sometimes there isn't almost any if you're playing some melee cleave comp, you know, or something. So in these situations, maybe, you know, it's pointless. But I would still purge it, because, you know, for yourself, if nothing else. I think sacrificing 1 global to remove 30% of damage resistance towards magic is worth it regardless, and we should do it as healers rather than, you know, asking our DPS to stop damage in order to do it. And I mean, honestly, this tank is doing such a good job at just keeps on pulling, mitigating damage, and at any point I did not feel like he was in danger or anything. So I just gotta give like kudos to that. Really good tank, good damage as well. I respect it, you know. It's such a big, honestly, it's such a big difference when you have a good tank. It's crazy. I feel like most keys are broken by, like, I hate to say it, because I mean, tanks are already like under so much pressure, and by the community as well. Like, I see all the time, you know, you're expected to know the route as tank. You're supposed to like kind of organize everything. It's honestly unfair to them, but I do want to say that like a lot of the times keys die because tanks are just not doing their job properly, and it's unfortunate, you know. It's a very ungrateful position. I feel very similar sometimes as a healer. It's like you do everything perfectly, you make one tiny mistake and somebody dies, and it's your fault, you know. And it's like very ungrateful role. So, you know, I hate saying things like this, but it really does make a difference. So just, you know, commendations to this tank, and kudos. He's done a phenomenal job. And you know, boss time. Right, Azureblade, kind of a tricky boss for us, I'm not gonna lie. Two things to pay attention to here. First of all, this boss does no damage. The only way he can damage your group is by summoning the Draconic image, and you don't interrupt it. So usually people just stun it and kill it during the stun. You will usually cleave off of it. One thing you want to pay attention to is boss has a frontal cleave, and that cleave will hit tank hard, so make sure tank is topped up and healed, and maybe even has some active mitigation during tyrannical. And the second part of the boss is the scary one, which is when he goes into this overwhelming what is it called, overwhelming power or something. You just like, this isn't as hard as it used to be. I think it's been nerfed like once or twice. It is definitely still terrifying, though. Do not underestimate this. Make sure that you're staying away so you have time to cast your spells, and make sure that the group is in your range. These are 2 kind of like checks that you need to watch out for. Rupture is decent, not amazing though, and so is Barrier, because usually they will split, so even if you Barrier, it doesn't really matter because they're split. You do have to watch out for, you know, usually these are two crutches that kind of like handle the lack of our, you know, direct healing output that we have as Discipline Priests. Now, unfortunately, since we can't use either of them reliably on this boss, you do have to be careful and you gotta be mindful and have like a plan for every situation that you can encounter on this boss, and obviously dodge these swirlies after you're killing the ad. Other than that, you're free to kind of like DPS. I usually tend to, you know, I rarely save Mindbender nowadays, but I do on this particular boss, I do tend to save Mindbender for that phase, just so we can like Zerg it faster, right? It's in general you want to save Mindbender for situations where you know the damage is coming, so you can do your ramp with the Mindbender. And I mean, it's not really a ramp in key content, it's kind of like a mini ramp, right? It's like you still kind of use the same cast sequence as you would on a ramp, it's just that you're only doing kind of like the damage portion of it, and obviously with that comes healing as well, since we're Discipline Priests. As you can see here, I put myself in kind of like a tricky position. I was standing a little bit too close, and then I avoided puddles in the opposite direction of my group, which also put me again in a awkward spot. Luckily, you know, with some off heals from the priest and stuff, it was completely fine, very stable. Honestly, on Fortified, just Radiances usually cover that damage pretty nicely. I think on Tyrannical the strat is that people stack, so you can keep them alive anyway, so you're not really expected to heal everybody while they're like standing, you know, in random directions and stuff. Like people are kind of expected to stand in the places where you can actually keep them alive. And here Shami dies to cast. I don't know what happened here with the interrupts. I guess they just kind of like stopped interrupting. Maybe they got a little bit cocky or something. And here in this situation, like, it's better to just CC the ad. This is why I walked close to it, because I was about to fear it. But it was unnecessary since it just died. And yeah, this is, you know, new meta. We used to do like skip frogs route, right? That was like when people discovered they can just skip this entire section, everybody started doing it. It's kind of like that situation, like scientists, you know, never ask themselves, like they asked themselves if they could, but they didn't ask themselves if they should, kind of situation, you know. It's like, can we skip frogs? Yes. Should we skip frogs? The answer is kind of difficult. Most of the time though, the answer to that is no. I do want to preface this by saying, for us, healing these packs is actually not easy for Discipline Priest. There's quite a bit of damage coming from the breaker, Draconic Breaker. He will do AoE, then he will shoulder charge someone, so you need to top that person up immediately before they get shoulder charged. On high tyrannical keys, shoulder charge is almost a one-shot. God forbid this is like a bolstering or raging or something like that. Like, these people are just dead on the spot, you know. You just have to. So these are the situations in which, I mean, like, it might be worth skipping these packs, or at least breakers, because you can actually skip breakers with suit and stuff. But in case you cannot, or your group refuses to, just keep in mind that you can just rupture someone while running, and then just keep them up with a bender, you know, throwing your pennons, and run ahead of the group so you can cast your radiances. After every roar, you can do your radiance into a few damaging spells, which should top everybody up, including the person that's going to get shoulder charged. And obviously, I'm assuming, you know, people aren't getting hit by frogs, since it's probably a one-shot anyway on this key level, so I'm not gonna waste my time talking about that. But in general, this part I found very tricky, especially since the whole season I've been mostly skipping frogs, so suddenly, you know, I'm expected to do frogs in like 24 Fortified. So it was quite a challenge. I've already failed one key. I failed 25 actually, by the way, before this. I just remembered. Yeah, I did 25 because I finished some other 24. I don't remember which one. Oh yeah, it was Shadow Moon. Shadow Moon Burial Grounds, SBG, and I got Azure Vault, and I was like, okay, let's speed it up, see what happens. And I got into a really good group. I got some really big boys in it, and we were playing really good until frogs. And then on frogs, it just turned into a disaster. It was like a 0, I think that's until frogs, and then we got like 20 something that's at the frogs, and we still had time to time it almost, but somebody left because I guess they got frustrated. We had like 6 minutes after killing frogs, which is usually enough to kill 2 bosses. Actually, it wasn't 6, it was like 4:50 or something. So maybe they just thought there's no time or didn't have faith or something. But either way, it's kind of silly because they were about to nerf the dungeon, so we would retroactively get Raya for that. So it's a shame, but you know, it is what it is. Maybe that person that left didn't know. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Regardless, it was, I would say, at least like 50% my fault, because I wasn't really ready for how difficult this pack is. I tried to do damage to speed things up, but I did not realize that these guys actually hurt a lot. So that's just what I want to warn you about, you know. Just be very mindful, guys, about these pulls. These pulls are not easy. You know, I used to think these frogs are just, you know, leaping idiots and you can do whatever you want, but that's not how it is, really. I mean, frogs are leaping idiots. The frogs aren't the problem. The problem is the breaker. Breaker is scary. That's why I would encourage groups to one-shot, like not one-shot, but like single target breaker, so it dies ASAP, so you can just focus on AoEing frogs. As you can see, I mean, my damage here wasn't even that bad. Like I'm doing 30k across all of this, right? That's pretty decent. You know, it's not druid numbers, it's not evoker numbers, but it's quite alright. It's quite alright, you know. Overall 24k. I think that's about what you can expect from your healer. That's about what you can expect, I believe, unless I'm mistaken. But from what I've seen, you know, from watching some streams and watching some other people play high keys, I think that's kind of like what healers give towards the end of the dungeon on overall. So I'm not too dissatisfied, you know. And this boss, kind of tricky, honestly. Not a very pleasant boss for us, but we do have good tools to deal with it. So what I usually do, I'll apply atonements, then as the bombs drop, I will usually throw my penance to top everybody up as they're walking out of this, and just be ready for the beam, because the beam does actually hurt, so just make sure everybody's topped up for that. For this AoE here, obviously hide, make sure everybody's healed up fully. Sometimes I'll pop rupture or barrier, you know, I vary, you know, I'll do one usually. So this was kind of silly of me, I shouldn't have done this. What you should do is rupture, barrier, and then you'll get rupture back for the third one, and that's the way you should do it, regardless. On Fortified it probably doesn't matter too much, but on Tyrannical you might have to do that so people survive, so they don't get one shot by that, because it does hurt a lot and it hits like a truck. So but either way, with this guy, I just like to do like as much damage as I can. This boss is kind of a pushover. It used to be very difficult, and it does require like very high HPS. It does require like pretty high HPS now. One mistake I did here is on the details. I've left you guys with the overall healing, for which I apologize. I was probably checking something out on the previous dungeon and I couldn't really. I forgot to switch, and now we don't really get to see like the current healing and stuff. But I bet that if we looked at the current healing at this point, it would be around 50k or something, because you are basically constantly AoE healing on this boss. It's pretty obnoxious, I'm not gonna lie, because the amount of damage you could do if you didn't have to do that would be so much bigger. But whenever you actually get like some time to recover from the whole thing, it's just kind of like he's either beaming or putting bombs, and it's just like constant movement and stuff, and this doesn't really like that, so you know, we suffer a little bit from there. So yeah, I'm assuming like druid can probably do big damage here, and I think evokers can too as well. Maybe not that much, but I think they can kind of do like 25k, maybe 20k. Evoker kind of sucks on single target though, at least for me. Maybe it's the lack of staff or something, but for me, the single target on Evoker has kind of been like lackluster, I'm not gonna lie. I think I do more on this even and stuff. And here, you know, we're just running. We're a little bit late here, so I get scared and I just start pain stopping everyone and popping my defensives and stuff. And I think I did a good job there at keeping everybody alive, actually, considering the situation. We just were like so out of place there. It was kind of funny. And here the Shami drops really low, but you know, I managed to save him in the last second, made it a little bit spookier than it needed to be probably. And yeah, that's the boss, boss dead. And now for the last boss. Okay, so this boss is actually really tricky. I still to this day do not understand exactly how to play this boss. I don't like, people are sometimes talking about baiting the balls and stuff. I don't really know what that means. I've tried to bait them. I don't like, can somebody maybe in the comments explain to me how the tracking works? I'd really appreciate it, because to me it just seems random, which means you cannot bait if it's random. Like, it just, like, of course if it goes on me I'll bait it away from the group. But regardless, I try to position outside, like I'll go too close to the balls to bait them to go on me, and then I'll just try to run them out. But of course this is not easy on Priest. It's, we don't, like, this fight is not really built for our spec, I swear to God. But yeah, what you can do here is you can obviously, like, after every penance, make sure to shield tank, because tanks actually get hit pretty hard on this one. There's nothing else to heal. I mean, this boss is pretty basic. It's honestly pretty free, even on Tyrannical. One thing you have to make sure is that you do not get one shot when he does the explosion, and the tank doesn't get one shot when he's dragon striking and doing his whatever it's called, eruption or this, yeah, unleash destruction. No, that's the crystal. I don't know what the spells are called, but yeah. Anyway, this thing, I think like they're preventing the balls from going on the tank like this, so that's a good strat. Once again, this tank proves to be knowledgeable about, you know, the dungeon and the little tricks and optimizations you can do. Really good movement by him. As you can see here, I'm trying to like kind of like call the balls to me and being like, yo, look at me, I'm here, but they just refuse to go on me, and here it finally happens, and they're scary, man. Like, look at this, like I can barely outrun them, and I just save my dispel for when they get close to me, and then I'll just start running a little bit quicker. But overall on this boss, a few things you need to do is just dispel whoever seems in trouble from the balls. I think that's probably the most important part. So like, if you see somebody's being chased by the balls and they're struggling, they don't have movement or stuff, something, just dispel them, you know, let them move fast. You know, if it doesn't have to be you that are baiting, it can be someone else. Do damage, of course, like, can do decent damage to this boss. As I said, there's not much healing. Using your trinkets on CD, you know, using your penance on CD, making sure that whenever you pop Mind Bender, you actually use all your Shadow Word Deaths and Mind Blasts available. Which, if you do correctly, you should get 4 Mind Blasts and 1 Shadow Word Death, which basically means your Mind Bender would slash 5 times in total, which is really good. It's a lot of damage, so don't miss out on that. I mean, I say that, sometimes I fail to do that as well, but you know, do your best to kind of like play properly, right? Like, sometimes somebody will need a shield or something, and of course you're not gonna let somebody die just to, like, you know, min-max your damage as a healer, which that'll be ridiculous. But I do encourage people to like, doing good damage as a healer is a big, like, sign of, you know, being a good player. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the dungeon. Really appreciate you guys watching. You know, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and hope to see you guys on the next video. Much love, guys. Bye bye.
My dear one, he knew that wild magic was